Dr. Francis Widdowson was invited to come and speak in Lethbridge on the topic of how wokeism threatens academic freedom. That was the topic, okay? And then she has a very strong research and writing background on Aboriginal policy. She's the author of several books. She's very well versed, very knowledgeable on that topic. And so then some people started saying online, oh, she's racist, white supremacist, residential school denier, all of this cheap, baseless name calling. Yeah. And then the university's president, Mike Mann, folded like a cheap tent and canceled the event which had been booked, which was scheduled for February 1st, 2023. So we have the president of the University of Lethbridge pandering to the mob and canceling a talk on how wokeism threatens academic freedom.
Adam Soos here for Rebel News, and I am now joined by the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, John Carpay, to discuss a very important legal proceeding. It's sort of very apparent that in many cases the laws follow the culture, but the culture is often set by academics, and sort of academic circles have been under attack. Certainly not a venue for free speech, or even what academics used to be all about, the discussion of ideas. So if you could just talk a little bit first, we're going to talk about this important case that's coming, but do you have any sort of insight or thoughts on sort of the world of academia as of late?
Well, we used to have a campus freedom index, and we give letter grades of A, B, C, D, E, F to universities and student unions. So the problems with campus free speech have been around for a long time. It started out initially, the only group on campus that was getting censored and silenced was pro-life students. And I warned 15 years ago that if that's allowed to continue, censorship will spread like a cancer. So here we are 15, 20 years later, and we see all kinds of opinions that you cannot say on campus. And it's a sad state of affairs. And it'll stay that way until taxpayers rise up and say that they no longer want their money going to fund institutions like the University of Lethbridge, which are fundamentally betraying their very mission and purpose.
Speaking of the University of Lethbridge, it is now the subject of legal action. If you could just maybe talk about sort of the events that led up to and the basis for this legal challenge.
So Dr. Francis Widdowson was a prof at Mount Royal University for many years. Employment terminated in late 2021 over essentially her political views, political positions, her speech, her expression. That was fundamentally the reason why Mount Royal University ended her employment. Now, Dr. Francis Widdowson was invited to come and speak in Lethbridge on the topic of how wokeism threatens academic freedom. That was the topic, okay? And then she has a very strong research and writing background on Aboriginal policy. She's the author of several books. She's very well versed, very knowledgeable on that topic. And so then some people started saying online, oh, she's racist, white supremacist, residential school denier, all of this cheap, baseless name calling. Yeah. And then the university's president, Mike Mann, folded like a cheap tent and canceled the event which had been booked, which was scheduled for February 1st, 2023. So we have the president of the University of Lethbridge pandering to the mob and canceling a talk on how wokeism threatens academic freedom.
I mean, it's the stories almost write themselves. Was there sort of an expectation that this might happen, or were they rolling into this thinking, oh, good, we're actually going to have an opportunity to chat about this important issue. It's great that a school is actually hosting it.
Well, these effectively fascists, because that's how they behave, they don't want debate. They don't want discussion. They're so convinced of the rightness of their own views that they feel fully entitled to shut down others. So they don't want to talk about Aboriginal policy. They don't want to have any kind of discussion on residential schools and what happened, what were they about. No dialogue, no discussion. The only thing you're allowed to do is speak back to them what they want to hear. And so we got to fight back against these fascists.
Well, and it's so problematic because you see not only is it happening to professors and people who want to come speak at these schools, but the students being formed inside of these schools are then so ingrained in these ideologies that they can't go out and do anything. And even particularly, I know with Francis Widdowson, incredible books like Disrobing the Aboriginal Industry, to name one. If you can't have honest conversations, you don't get to truth or reconciliation. You just stagnantly continue. And I know so many Indigenous communities are suffering because these honest conversations can't be had. I believe there's a couple other people named as well on the lawsuit as well. Can you talk a little bit about them?
So Dr. Paul Viminitz is a professor at the University of Lethbridge, and he organized the event. He sought and obtained the approval of the university administration that they could book Anderson Hall for Dr. Widdowson to speak. So I went through all the steps and got the booking. So he is a co-applicant and as well as a student, last name Pickle. He asserts another dimension of the charter argument, which is that the charter guarantee of freedom of expression also includes a right on the part of people to hear and listen and consider for themselves different opinions. So when you cancel a speaker, is not only that speaker who's being harmed, it's also the potential listeners that do not get to decide for themselves, to hear the message themselves, decide for themselves whether it's true or false, right or wrong, good or bad, reasonable, unreasonable, accurate, inaccurate. So that's the other dark side, is you're really depriving people of the right to hear alternative perspectives. So that will be a legal issue raised in the court action as well.
Well, it's great to see that a professor that's still on board. Often it's sort of this monolith academics that you can't deal with. It's great to see both a student and a professor from the school sort of standing on the side of freedom and ultimately standing on the side of authentic academics, which is these conversations. What's sort of the best case scenario? What is the sort of ask or outcome if everything goes your way?
So the court action is not seeking damages, otherwise known as money. We're not seeking money, but we're seeking a declaration that the charter freedom of expression of Dr. Francis Widdowson, Dr. Paul Viminitz, and Jonah Pickle have been violated. And also a declaration, a court order that the University of Lethbridge proceed to hold the event. So those are the two remedies sought. The University of Lethbridge fundamentally has two choices. They can settle and acquiesce, and then the litigation will end quickly, or they can spend taxpayers' money on fighting against it, and they can drag this out for 2 or 3 years. That's up to the University of Lethbridge.
Well, if they acquiesce, we'll certainly be there to cover the event. I suppose the final question I have for you, from a legal perspective, could a case like this set precedent with, obviously, we're seeing cancellations right across North America, around the world, of anyone who dares sort of speak outside the party lines? Is there a potential for this to be a precedent-setting case?
Every case is precedent-setting insofar as within the province, it can be a binding authority, but in other provinces, it can be a persuasive authority. So whether the outcome is good or bad, either way, it will be influential on the development of the law in Canada.
Well, John, I want to thank you so much for your time, and thanks to the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms for doing all this incredible work. Is there anything upcoming or anything you want to promote, or where can people learn more about the Justice Center?
We're at www.jccf.ca. We've got a George Jonas Freedom Award dinner coming up in Calgary, September the 28th, with featuring Dr. Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford University as a keynote speaker. And I'm always grateful for the generous donors that make it possible for us to carry out our work.
And tickets for that event, jccf.ca?
Correct, yes.
Wonderful, awesome. Again, thanks so much, John.
Thank you.
And everyone at home, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. Well, you heard right off the top of that interview how the laws of the land often follow from the culture in a land, and beyond academic institutions that affect and help form culture, media institutions and news institutions also have a significant impact. And that's why it is more critical than ever that we have independent media outlets out there that are willing to pursue the truth and that aren't beholden to the government. This government, under Justin Trudeau, wants to control the media that you have access to, and they want to control the media that your family, your friends, and everyone you know has access to. That's how they control the culture, and that's how they eventually control the laws and shape new laws by seeking a mandate, in this case an artificial mandate, from the people they control. It's more important than ever that we have independent media, and that's why I'm encouraging you to consider subscribing to Rebel News Plus. You'll get access to our exclusive shows with Ezra Levant and Sheila Gunn-Reid, plus some incredible documentaries that you won't see anywhere else. So consider subscribing now and support the important work that we're doing.